Today on Know the Truth, a new lesson from Philip de Courcy.
Friends are important. That's why Proverbs 12:26 and 13:20 tells us, choose your friends carefully. And you should give time to your friends. You should give trust to your friends. You should be there with them in their trouble as they will be in your trouble. You should be truthful, forgiving, gracious, tactful. Good friends make us better friends with God.
Welcome to Know the Truth, and today, Philip de Courcy offers some powerful inspiration from the Apostle Paul's last recorded words on the things that matter the most in life. It's the start of a three-part lesson titled, What Matters Most, the last message in the Without Apology series. If you've missed any of these faith-building messages, they're available at ktt.org and on the KTT app. Just search your app store for Know the Truth with Philip de Courcy. Right now, let's join Philip in 2 Timothy 4 for today's message.
The British writer and wit, Samuel Johnson, famously said this: when a man knows he's to be hanged in a fortnight, it concentrates the mind wonderfully. He's right. You can imagine that to be true. When we see the approach of death, it has a way of reprioritizing life, of switching the price tags, of making us think about what's truly valuable. When we see the approach of the Grim Reaper, it has a way of refocusing us. Death and the thought of death separates the big things from the small things in life, the permanent from the passing, the spiritual and eternal from the material and the temporal. Death sobers us up, and it pushes us to get down to the things that really matter. Isn't that why Psalm 90 verse 12 tells us, number your days and apply your heart to wisdom? Meditate on your death. It will be good for the way you live. In fact, in Ecclesiastes 7 verses 1 to 4, we're told to go to the house of mourning because it's better than the house of feasting. To attend a funeral has a way of sobering us up that a party can never deliver. And so when you look at death, it makes you look at life, and you realize that you've only so much that's been given to you in terms of days allotted, and you want to use those wisely. That's why Spurgeon, the great English preacher, said, to be familiar with the grave is prudence. And I want to carry those thoughts into the passage we're about to look at, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 9 through 22. It would be easy to conclude at your first reading that what you have here is just a jumble of kind of final instructions from Paul. Some appeals he makes to friends, he updates them in his own personal situation, and he sends and receives greetings and best wishes. But I think if you take a second look at this passage, there's something more going on, because this is set against the backdrop of Paul's impending martyrdom. Hasn't he made it clear in verse 6? I'm ready to be poured out like a drink offering, as in I'm ready to spill my blood for the gospel and the honor of Jesus Christ. He says the time of my departure, the time of my death, the time of my leaving this world is at hand. It's soon. It's going to come quickly. The language of these verses in verses 6 through 8 are the languages of a man who realizes that his life has been largely lived, because he uses this kind of language. I have fought the good fight, and I have finished the race, and I have kept the faith. Therefore, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord will give to me on that day. And not to me only, but all those who love his appearing. And so you see that Paul is writing very conscious of the fact that his time is short. In fact, in our verses, that comes across also. Look at verse 9, which picks up right away from the language of verses 6, 7, and 8. Be diligent to come to me quickly. Now, on the one hand, very practically, he's saying to Timothy, hey, the sooner you get here, the better, because I miss you. But I also think by implication, he's saying, the time of my departure is at hand. If you don't get here soon, I won't see you, and you won't see me, because I'll have been dispatched to heaven by means of martyrdom. So you get my point. When you come to these verses, you look at them, and I did for a while. I was sitting down at the Starbucks at the Orange Circle a week or so ago, just reading this and reading it and going, right, what's Paul at here? What's the author's intent? What's he trying to get across? And you've got all these, comings and goings of his friends. You've got this update on his personal situation. You've got him talking about his first trial. What does it all amount to? And I find that the interpretive key is this key. He's about to die. So if this is Paul's last few paragraphs, because this is his last letter, I'm guessing he's going to be focused on the things that really matter. And that's why I took a second look at the passage with this idea. Paul, what really matters? You're about to die. Your martyrdom's just a month or two away. And if this is your last kind of letter, and these are the last words in your letter, I'm guessing you've got a priority list going on here somewhere. And I started to look at it, and several things jumped out. And I've come up with this outline, and it's this, that you know what? Friendship matters most. Faithfulness matters most. Forgiveness matters most. Faith matters most. And forever matters most. What matters most? That should matter to us. You don't want to come to the end of your life having just allowed your days not to amount to much, to frivolously have thrown away your life for that which really doesn't count. Number your days and apply your heart to wisdom. And here are 5 things that should matter. Let's start with the first one, friendship. Friendship matters. Now, we have made it clear this is Paul's last letter. It's his second letter to Timothy. It's around AD 67. He'll soon be martyred, according to church tradition. But we read here of this intimacy, this deep and abiding relationship between Timothy and Paul. Look at verse 2 of chapter 1. To Timothy, a beloved son. Look at chapter 2, verse 1. You therefore, my son. Paul is at the end of his life. He dispatches a correspondence off to this young man he loves deeply, urging him to be faithful to that which Paul's been faithful to, namely the treasure of the gospel. And so it shouldn't surprise us when we come to the end of this letter. He's dying for Timothy to come, because that's his son in the faith. Come quickly, come before winter. But beyond that, we shouldn't be surprised at the end of this letter that Paul mentions other people who are dear and near to him. Fellow workers in the gospel, those he has done mission with, those he's been in the trenches with. And he writes about their movements and how they can minister to him. And what's clear here, that as Paul approaches his death, what matters most is his friends, his fellow workers in the gospel. Paul had a network of friends and co-laborers that he treasured. He was not a lone ranger. In fact, if you do your homework and read the New Testament, and I think Paul wrote somewhere like 13 letters of the New Testament, you'll find within his letters some 100 names of people he calls out. People who are in his circle of friends. And you have several of them here. In fact, if you go to Romans 16, there are 26 people specifically named. If you go to Colossians 4, there are 10 people specifically named. When you come here to this chapter, there are 19 people specifically named. 16 men, 2 women, and the Lord Jesus, who is the friend of all friends. So what's the point? It's a very simple one. Paul's writing his last few words, and included in that correspondence is updates and directions to his friends, because friends matter. He sends some of them, he scolds some of them, he salutes some of them, and he summons some of them. He writes with a sense of need, and so he wants some of his friends to come and minister to him physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Bring me a coat, I'm freezing. Bring me some books, I want to study. And come and join me, let's pray together and fortify my soul, because I think it's all over for me. So he writes with a sense of need. He writes with a sense of disappointment. He's deeply disappointed in Demas. who has deserted him for this present world. He's disappointed in the believers at Rome because none of them stood with him in his first trial. They were a no-show. And then he writes to, dispatch some of his friends to new places of ministry or to go back over old hunting ground for the sake of the gospel. Point being that he favored friendships. And here's a simple thought I want to bring out. We could develop this, but I'm just going to leave it for what it is. Paul is about to die, and he's dying with the presence of Christ and with the company of friends. And that's what he values. He certainly values the Lord Jesus. When no one stood with him, Jesus stood with him. We'll get to that in a moment. But alongside that, he's thankful that Luke is there. He wants Timothy to come soon and before winter, and he wants him to bring John Mark, who at one point Paul had washed his hands off. He was a ministerial dropout. He was a no good guy. But Mark has redeemed himself by the grace of God. He's back in the game, and Paul's excited to spend some time in the company of this young man and to let him know, hey, I'm in your corner. I had to say some rough things. Sometimes there's tough love. But you've got this all going on. So just try and get this thought that as Paul dies, he's enjoying a sense of Jesus' presence, but he wants his friends to be there because friends are important. They're important in life and they're important in death. Genesis 2:18, it is not good that man should be alone. Life is a team sport. It's not a solo, it's a team sport. And we should have friends. We should favor friends. We should discover friends. We should invest in friends. We should treasure friends. We should be a friend. That's going to help us through life. They'll make a success of us, the right ones. We'll want them around our deathbeds because they helped us to get where we got to. And we'll treasure their company. And they'll focus us on the gospel and on Jesus Christ. That's why Ecclesiastes 4, verses 9 to 12, what is it? 2 is better than 1. So Paul's challenging you and me, young or old, favor friendships. Have several friends that have been with you across a lifetime, who have been in the trenches, who have been there when you've shed a tear in sorrow, when you've laughed in success, who were in your face when you were pointed in the wrong direction. Have some people like that in your life. And it's never too late to find them and treasure them. Because it has been well said that a man is not poor who is rich in friends. Good friends will come in when the world goes out. Good friends make us better friends with God. Good friends know all about us and are still happy to keep company with us. Good friends are another room to live in. They expand life. Good friends half our sorrow, double our joys, and triple our significance. Friends are important. That's why Proverbs 12:26 and 13:20 tells us, choose your friends carefully. Friendship is a walled garden with a gate. Only certain people should be allowed in. And you should give time to your friends. You should give trust to your friends. You should be there with them in their trouble as they will be in your trouble. You should be truthful, forgiving, gracious, tactful. Here's homework for you. Read the book of Proverbs, one of the best manuals on friendship. Get a piece of paper and a pen and write down the verses that mention friendship, and you'll come up with a profile on what it is to be a friend and what to look for in your friends. That's why I love part of Jackie Robinson's story. I haven't watched 42 in a while. I need to rewatch it. It's an inspiring story. First black man in America to play in the major leagues. If you listen to him and watch him, he acted with class. He was a man of character. And he faced a lot. Played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And there's a scene in his life where he's in Boston playing and he's up against what he has met all across the baseball league, fastballs to the head, the opposition spiking him at the bases, crowds being venomous in their hatred of him, the opposite dugout shouting epithets his way. And he's handled it with a certain courage and fortitude, but this day it's getting to him. He's at breaking point. And if you've watched the movie, if read the story, you'll know that there's a Southern gentleman on the team, Pee Wee Reese, who leaves the Dodgers dugout, goes over to second base in the middle of the game with the crowd, the fans, the other team hurling insults, and he puts his arm around Jackie Robinson. He doesn't say anything. One, he wouldn't be heard. Number two, what he did was saying it all. He's my friend. And you got to come through me to get to him. Jackie Robinson says that moment saved his baseball career. Friendship is a wonderful thing. It's a treasure. Something to be valued. Something that you want to work at, something you want to enjoy down to your dying breath. I hope you and I have friends across a lifetime. And time and distance and issues don't get in the way. And I just want you to reread that passage later, and you go through all these lists, but you need to realize all these people knew Paul, were known by Paul. They were all close to Paul, some closer. And Paul's dying, and he treasures them, because what matters most in life? Number one, friendships. Number two, faithfulness. Faithfulness. Because if you reread these verses, you're going to see that Paul is isolated and abandoned. And he has faced opposition for his gospel commitment. Notice that verse 10, Demas has forsaken me, having loved this present world, and has departed for Thessalonica. I don't believe that Demas forsook Christ. I don't believe he was an apostate. Neither does John Calvin and many biblical writers. I believe that he took cold feet. I believe the thought of this present world, convenience and comfort, drove him back to Thessalonica, where there was a church. But he didn't want to stand with Paul, because that came at a cost. And his love for the material, his love for the present moment, his love for his own preservation caused him to betray his friend. And that's there. Alexander the coppersmith, according to verse 14, does Paul much harm and opposes him. There's a debate as to who this Alexander is. There's an Alexander in Acts 19 that actually stood with Paul in the beginning of the church at Ephesus, where this letter is going, because that's where Timothy is. But that's not the Alexander. I also don't think it's the Alexander of 1 Timothy 4, who was a heretic and was indeed put out of the church for his own sake. No, I think this guy's probably like Demetrius the silversmith. If you go to Acts 19, you'll read about Demetrius the silversmith, who was someone who fashioned idols and opposed the gospel. Because when people got saved, that ate into his business. He was a bottom line guy. I don't like Paul. I don't like his gospel. I don't like what it does in the lives of my customers. And I think we've got this going on. I think that's who Alexander is. He's a business guy. He probably fashions idols too. It's like Demetrius the silversmith. Alexander the coppersmith hates me and has stood in my way, and he warns Timothy about him, which again would point to the fact he's somewhere in Ephesus. And Paul says, I just give him over to God. Then you've got the fact, verse 16, that no one stands with Paul, right? He's by himself. He's on his Todd. He's alone, deserted, opposed by foes, let down by friends. So nobody at the church of Rome, where Paul is in Rome, they were a no-show. Kind of sad, isn't it? But here's the thing that strikes me. No lawyers, no friends. Well, he's got Luke, only Luke. He's wanting Timothy to come soon. But there he stands as a lonely soldier committed to the gospel. But that's okay for Paul. He wished it was otherwise, but whatever they do is not going to determine what he does, and so he remains faithful. What does he say to Timothy? 2 Timothy 1, verse 8, therefore do not be ashamed of the testimony of our Lord, nor of me, his prisoner, but share with me in the sufferings of the gospel according to the power of God. Timothy, it costs to be a gospel minister. Are you willing to pay the price? I hope so, and God will empower you to do it. We read in chapter 4, verse 7, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. Remember we said that's not subjective faith. Paul's not saying that I die confessing my trust in Jesus Christ. He's saying I die committed to the same gospel I heard that brought me to faith. I still believe that Jesus is the eternal Son of God. I still believe that Jesus was in the beginning with God and was God and created all things for the glory of God. I believe he was virgin born. I believe that there was a perfect union of human nature and divine nature in Jesus Christ. I believe in his miracles, his sinlessness. I believe in his death on our behalf, the shedding of his blood to make atonement for our sin. I believe in his resurrection bodily 3 days later. I believe in his ascension. I believe in his prayers on my behalf as an advocate between God and man. And I believe right now he may be getting off his throne to return any day. I believe that. I still believe that. And I do believe that. And I will die believing that. It's powerful. That's where Paul is, because in the end, gospel commitment matters. You'll want to die with some of your friends nearby. And you'll want to die with a firm grip on the gospel. And know that you never deserted it. You didn't betray it ethically, morally, or theologically. That you're still standing. You read this last chapter and these last verses, as I did several times, trying to get Paul, I don't want to get lost in all the details. What's going on here? Well, here's what's going on here, Philip. I'm showing you what matters most. And you will see I'm dispatching this person there, and I'm sending this person there, because I want the gospel to keep going out into the world. I want disciples to be made. I want them to be baptized. I want churches to be established. I'm focused there right up to the end. And that's challenging, folks. Everything is secondary to his commitment to the gospel. He wants to know that on the other side of death's door, he's going to hear one thing and one thing only: well done, Paul, good and faithful servant. And you know what? That's what matters. What matters most is the gospel.
You're listening to Know the Truth, and a lesson titled What Matters Most. If you tuned in late to today's message, we've made all of Pastor Philip's sermons easy to find and replay over on our website at ktt.org or on the KTT app and podcast. Just search for Know the Truth with Philip DeCourcy in your favorite app store or podcast platform. Well, as we learned today, what matters most in this life is the gospel, and that's why it's our mission at Know the Truth to share the gospel with a world in need of truth. And as a listener-supported ministry, we couldn't do it without your faithful financial support. So today we hope you'll consider partnering with us by giving a one-time gift of any amount. You can also sign up to become a Truth Ambassador. Truth Ambassadors give a monthly recurring donation, allowing us to plan and prepare these programs each day, every month, and all through the year. It's easy to sign up online at ktt.org or call us at 888-644-8811. Please know that your partnership is a difference maker. And when you give, you'll receive God versus Government by Nathan Busenitz and James Coates. This book follows two brave churches and their decisions to remain open during the pandemic despite orders to remain closed. This book will enlighten believers in what it looks like to take a stand when Christ and compliance collide. Request yours with a gift of any amount at 888-644-8811 or give online at ktt.org. And if you'd prefer to write, send it to Know the Truth, Post Office Box 30250, Anaheim Hills, California, 92809. And if you're a new listener or have never reached out, sign up for your own free copy of Resting in God's Daily Sufficiency. Learn more about it at ktt.org. Also, be sure to connect with us on our social media channels. You'll find us on most platforms when you search for Know the Truth with Philip DeCourcy. I'm your host, Wayne Shepherd. Join us tomorrow when Philip DeCourcy continues to remind us about what matters most. That's Wednesday on Know the Truth. Today's program was produced and sponsored by Know the Truth Incorporated. Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free."